cornea update, both cornea subspecialists at Minnesota Eye.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is always a fun event. It's good to see everyone here. And the sun is shining finally, and now we're indoors, so it's working out just great. But Dr. Hardten and I are going to be talking about cornea, and I'm going to start off by discussing collagen crosslinking. So I am a speaker for Evadro, which is part of what we're going to be talking about today. Well, we'll start off with a quick case here. So this is a 22-year-old male with keratoconus, and he came in complaining of worsening vision in his left eye. His glass is about 2 years old, and you can see about 2,400 and a good amount of cyl, as you can see. The refraction was done, and there's an increase of myopia and a pretty significant increase of cylinder as well, but able to get him into an RGP fit and still seeing quite good. This is his cornea, and as you can see, pretty significantly keratoconic, about 10 diopters across the central visual axis, so fairly impressive topography. And on slit lamp, also you can see that there's a pretty significant central thinning and coning. His central picture is about 340 microns. So we've got a young guy with progressive keratoconus, pretty thin central cornea, fairly distorted cornea, but yet he's got pretty good vision in an RGP. So my question to you is, for this patient, what would he benefit the most from? Epithelium off crosslinking, epithelium on crosslinking, intact, or corneal transplant? So this is a choose your own adventure question, so you can punch the audio response buttons there. And Price Waterhouse has tallied the results, and number 2, which was epithelium on crosslinking, as you remember, got a lot of votes. Epithelium off crosslinking got a lot of votes too. And since the talk is about crosslinking, most of you chose crosslinking, so that was kind of it was a softball. It's early in the morning, so there you go. You're getting woken up here. Okay, so yeah, I would pick epithelium on crosslinking for him for several reasons, which we'll sort of go through in the course of the talk here. He's got good vision in RGP, so I don't think that he particularly would benefit from a cornea transplant at this point, or intacts, which we typically use to reshape the cornea when they start to have not good RGP fit. Epithelium off or on crosslinking would certainly provide a way to stabilize the cornea. Epithelium on crosslinking would potentially a little bit more gentle and potentially less refractive shift in this patient with a thinner cornea and a fairly thin central epithelium. So we'll talk about those things as we go forward here. So collagen crosslinking was derived by the Dresden group in Germany. Theo Seiler is the godfather of crosslinking. And they came from these observations that keratoconic corneas are less rigid, and there's less progression of keratoconus with age. There's a physiologic crosslinking that occurs as patients get older. They also observed that there's some conditions like diabetes that are protective, or glycolation of the tissues causes of pathologic crosslinking. So these patients that are keratoconic and have diabetes have much less rapid rates of progression. They looked around medicine and looked for ways to stiffen the collagen fibers. And there's the 3 basic approaches, 2 of which were fairly slow or toxic, using an enzymatic or glutaraldehyde reaction or glycolation reaction. And so these did not provide very good models for crosslinking of the cornea. And they looked at industry though, and oxidation exposure of UV light causes a very rapid oxidation, and that certainly be a good starting point. They looked at riboflavin as an adjuvant cross-linking process, and it's a unique molecule because it is both a photoinitiator, which enhances UV oxidation by releasing more free radicals in the reaction of UV light with the riboflavin. But it's also kind of a sunscreen too. It protects the cornea. The deeper the cornea, the depth that the cornea goes, the less penetration of the UV light occurs because the riboflavin is absorbing the UV light into more outer layers of the cornea. And so the overall effect is the classic corneal Viagra picture here with a stiffened cornea on the top versus the not so stiff cornea on the bottom and cross-linked. So the stabilization effect of cross-linking is pretty dramatic. There's a large body of evidence in the literature currently suggesting that this technique halts the progression of keratoconus. The CE mark was gained in 2007 as is the typical pattern for everything in medical technology. Europe gets it a lot sooner than we do. The U.S. trials started in late 2008 or late 2009. MEC was a part of the original U.S. trials for off collagen cross-linking. The trial process continued, fits and starts, several rejections by the FDA until finally in April and July 2006, Avedro achieved approval for their KXL cross-linking system. That's composed of the ultraviolet light as well as the ultraviolet, as well as the riboflavin itself, which they divided into two. They call it Photrex viscous and Photrexa, which is the ecotonic version of the riboflavin. The indication they achieved was for the treatment of progressive keratoconus, and so progression must be documented to be on label for the use of the device. In the treatment of cornea, but also the treatment of corneotasia after refractive surgery, such as post-LASIK acacia. Also for on label is a central corneal thickness of at least 400 microns. So the Avedro procedure is the Dresden protocol, which is the epithelium off protocol. The epithelium is removed. The Photrexa viscous is placed on the cornea for over the course of about half an hour. And then the cornea is checked to make sure that it's at least 400 microns thickness that's required for treatment. If the cornea isn't that thick, then the Photrexa hypotonic solution is applied until the cornea swells up to 400 microns. Then the UV light is applied for 30 minutes at 3 milliwatts per centimeter squared. And that's actually not very much UV light. That's about the same amount of UV light that the TSA screener uses to screen your driver's license to make sure it's not a fake. So you can kind of think about that as the potency of the UV that's coming. So epithelium off has several advantages. The first is that we know it's very efficacious. It has a very deep, intense cross-linking effect. And again, there's robust literature support that it does work. It causes a progressive flattening that actually continues on probably over the first at least a couple of years and potentially even longer. Some of the range of global diopters is sort of the average, but it can vary widely depending on the cornea. And again, another main advantage of the epithelium off approach right now is that it is FDA approved, and insurance coverage is sort of starting to happen. We'll touch on that a little bit more here in a minute. Disadvantages are that you have to remove the epithelium, so it's more traumatic to the eye. There's a relatively high incidence of corneal scarring. So Dr. Seiler himself presented data at the American Academy of Ophthalmology meeting this past, should be 2016, this past year, that it's almost 3% of patients having epithelium off cross-linking are going to have some level of scarring or a small scar. Most of those are not visually significant, but yet scarring is occurring. It's also the slow epithelial healing process and potentially increased risk of corneal ulceration, of course, pain and discomfort anytime you're causing a corneal abrasion. And then lastly, these are patients, because of this, all these downsides of the monocular healing, we seem to want to do unilaterally as opposed to bilaterally. Another issue with the epithelium cross-linking is that almost universally we'll see postoperative haze. It's very, very common. It's usually in the anterior 300 microns or so. The cornea is deeper than what we typically see with PRK, and that's with epithelial haze with PRK. It usually resolves in about a year, and it's usually not visually significant, but it is quite impressive on this level to see these patients. So you're definitely knowing that there's something was done to the cornea to change its structure. Another issue with the epithelium off cross-linking is that there can be very significant refractive shifts because we're removing the epithelium that has been form-fitted to that cone for many, many years. And so the way to think about this is that over the course of a patient's lifetime, their central corneal epithelium, the nipple of the cone, usually is much thinner and becomes more thicker at the periphery of the cone as the cornea is trying to recreate a normal corneal curvature over this irregular underlying stroma. And so we scrape all that off, and it's kind of like we're starting from scratch. The epithelium then heals over, but it heals over at a more uniform thickness and sometimes even taller in the central cornea. So this creates a much steeper keratometry, at least initially, and a very consistent corneal epithelial thickness. So this can cause fairly significant refractive shifts in these patients over the first several months. So for epithelial on cross-linking, this has kind of been the holy grail of cross-linking ever since it was really introduced. And the question is, can we avoid the downsides of taking off the epithelium but still have a procedure that's effective enough to keep these people from progressing? The problem, of course, is this little pink layer here at the top of the picture called epithelium. And this little pink layer is very resistant to having things go through it. That's the way God designed it, and it's a problem that we have been trying to work around. And so that's been the main issue, is how to get the riboflavin, which does not penetrate the epithelium on its own, down into the stroma. So many of the early attempts, there are several of the early attempts that were published in the literature, I should say, for epithelium on cross-linking were not effective, and they showed progression of the patients over the course of the first couple of years. So being on cross-linking got kind of a bad rap really early on, and for that reason, it was sort of poo-pooed, at least initially, by the ophthalmic community. During that time, there's been lots of efforts to increase the penetration of the riboflavin through the epithelium and to improve the efficacy. And that was really the main problem with the early studies, is that they didn't really do a good job of making sure that they had good stromal soaking. And so now BAK, Sherman, EDTA, other measures have been applied to get that riboflavin into the epithelium, and we're starting to see much better efficacy. So for the past 4 years, NBC has been involved in an epithelium on cross-linking trial called Crosslinking USA. And we presented some of this data before, and also at several of the ophthalmic national meetings, but we've been extremely impressed by the efficacy of the epithelium on approach with this trial, and such that even at 12 and 24 months, if you're comparing epithelium on and epithelium off cross-linking, we're seeing essentially the same results. There's no statistical difference in change in Kmax, which is the maximum keratometry on the pentacam, or the average keratometry. And so basically stability is what we're achieving with this epithelium approach. So epithelium on, basically the procedure is involves soaking the cornea with the riboflavin solution. We use kind of a special soaking sponge just to kind of help that riboflavin get great contact with the cornea during the entire soaking process. And then the other key is after 20 minutes, when we're examining these patients to make sure that we're seeing riboflavin penetrating through the stroma, you can actually see that the stroma turns green, and that's your cue that there's ribo in the stroma itself. Other advancements are that the formulation itself, of course, we're using is helping the penetration. We have been playing a little bit with the light itself, and fractionated light actually has a better efficacy because it allows regeneration of the oxygen-free radicals when the light is off. So if you leave the light on the whole time, you kind of run out of gas. But if you turn it on and off, that gives time for the oxygen reaction to restart itself each time. And then another key point is that rather than dropping riboflavin on the cornea as the original protocols have suggested, we just use saline with riboflavin itself for the sunscreen. So just little tweaks like this have helped to greatly improve the efficacy. What we've seen in these patients, even over the course of the 2-year measurements, or stability, which is what we're looking for. So again, the advantages of epithelium on are that it's a faster recovery, much less painful. There's a greatly decreased risk of epithelium-related complications like slow healing or scar infection. Large refractive shifts are avoided because we're not scraping off that central corneal epithelium. We can do thinner treatments as well. Our trial has allowed us to go down to 250 microns, and we've seen no effect on the endothelium, even at very thin treatment rates such as that. Each of the patients in the trial has received a spectral microscopy, and there's been no change in endothelial cell density. And another big advantage is these patients can be treated bilaterally because it's such a simple procedure. The main disadvantage, of course, is less intense, so it doesn't have that deeply intensive effect of cross-linking. We don't get quite as much corneal flattening of that 2+ diopter range on average. But yet, stability is what we're after. We don't really care all that much if we're flattening the cornea by a diopter or 2, because in these patients, it doesn't probably make that much difference. But the other big key, of course, is it's not currently FDA approved, and therefore not currently covered by insurance. So the post-op care for epithelium off is very similar to PRK. They have pretty significant irritation over this first several days. They get a bandage contact lens placed. The bandage lens is kept in for typically around 5 to 7 days and then removed when the epithelium is fully healed. They get that central epithelial ridge right in the middle of the cornea that causes the vision to kind of fluctuate or be kind of funky in the first 4 to 6 weeks after the epi is healed. And they're getting antibiotic and steroid for the first couple of months to help with that epithelial healing process. Epithelium on is, of course, much quicker. That afternoon, I was telling patients the eye's going to feel really pretty scratchy for me. It's kind of like LASIK in a sense. It kind of feels kind of uncomfortable just for the afternoon. They go home, they take a nap. Typically by the evening, it's feeling quite a bit better. By the next morning, most patients are feeling mostly back to normal. On the first day, we're just looking for punctate epitheliopathy or any corneal abrasions that have occurred overnight. In these cases, bandage contact lenses can be placed, but usually it's just for a few days. And they have really rapid healing, basically. It's just kind of lubrication, antibiotic and steroid for about a week or so. And in about a week, we're letting them go back to their old contacts at that point. So as far as the payment, this is kind of the tricky part of this one. So now we have this procedure that has been FDA approved, and insurances are starting to recognize it. So we have 1 or 2 insurances that have started to cover it. Of course, they're covering it at extremely low rates, so we're working through that process now. But other insurances do not even as of yet cover the epithelium off of a procedure. And so we're kind of in this sort of no man's land right now that we work through with any new process. So for the time being, basically it's still we're approaching as kind of a self-pay for the patients. The patients are responsible for submitting this back to their insurance, unless in those cases the insurance has already told us that it's a covered procedure. For the epithelium off cross-linking, for the epithelium on cross-linking, again, this is an off-label procedure, so typically insurance is probably not going to cover that as well. So still there probably will be some out-of-pocket that goes along with that. There are still some patients that are in our Crosslinking USA trial, which we just ended up closing last week, that will still be definitely experimental and not be covered by insurance. So there is, again, like I said, kind of the gray zone that's sort of happening here with it. But we still have the ability to offer both forms of the cross-linking epithelium on, if that's what the patient desires, or if their insurance currently requires that, and that's the route they want to go, or if they're interested in epithelium off cross-linking, or if they're interested in epithelium on cross-linking for the quicker recovery, the gentler approach. That is something that we can still offer as well. If they have concurrent impacts or connective keratoplasty for corneal reshaping at the time of cross-linking, that's something that is built to insurance. And we are still doing the co-management situations similar to LASIK and PRK for these folks. So the only questions, again, can be routed to Scott Teska. His number is there. It's in your in your book as well for any sort of fine detailed building questions. He can help with that. And there we go. So in conclusion, cross-linking has really changed the game of keratoconus and implanted corneas. Epithelium off cross-linking is now FDA approved. It's effective, but the epithelium removal does increase the risks of the patient and certainly increase the discomfort, as well as the length of the procedures if we're just doing one eye, monocularly, and the next eye after the first is healed. Epithelium on cross-linking has been extremely effective in clinical trial status and is currently off-label use for the approved devices. But a wider range of corneas can be treated, and it decreases the risks and discomfort of epithelial removal, but still maintaining a high efficacy for stabilization. So that is our little update on collagen cross-linking. With that, I think we'll move directly to Dr. Hardten's talk, and then we'll take some questions at the end of his talk.
Well, good morning, and I'm also excited to have you all here today and spend the day with us, and hopefully you'll find it worthwhile. I think we've got a real exciting agenda, and I want to thank the whole committee that put this together, and all the docs that are going to speak today. I'm going to talk about cataract surgery in patients with retinal disease. Over the last year or so, Sherman and I have been involved in a new procedure called Implantable Miniature Telescope, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I think it provides, not for an extremely large number of patients, but it provides an exciting opportunity for some of those patients that have very significant issues with macular degeneration. So, the typical indications for cataract surgery are the problems of activities, daily living, and yet at each point along the way, we're trying to figure out, okay, how much of the problem with that patient's vision is the cataract, and are there other problems or concomitant disease that are going on? Most of our patients don't have concomitant disease, so we're able to give them all sorts of different options with cataract surgery. You'll hear about some of those options and a couple of the other upcoming talks, things like just getting rid of the cataract, still using glasses, or astigmatism, correction with either astigmatic keratotomy or toric IOLs, monovision, and then presbyopic correction. We have a much greater range now of lens options for patients with presbyopic correction. But one of the major concomitant diseases or problems that patients have is retinal disease. And I've listed a few of them there. Macular degeneration, a variety of different ranges from just a few drusen all the way to, as you see there, some geographic scarring in the retina that might severely limit their vision even with cataract surgery. Epiretinal membrane, so this is extremely common. We're able to now pick this up much easier than what we were able to before with OCT testing, but a lot of patients will have some epiretinal membrane that might at least require attention and maybe just a little bit of extra drops, or maybe they have epiretinal membrane surgery before cataract surgery, after cataract surgery, or combined with cataract surgery. So we need to look or screen for why is this patient's view in 20/30 and their vision is 20/80, right? So the epiretinal membrane is one of those potential issues. Diabetic retinopathy, again, in our patient population now, I think diabetes is much more tightly controlled than what it used to be. So we see a little bit less diabetic retinopathy, but it's also certainly important to screen for that in the retinas. Myopic degeneration or prior vascular occlusion, branch retinal vein, central retinal vein occlusion, etc., are some of the other retinal problems that can occur in patients that you're screening for cataract surgery. And obviously the diagnosis, the main way of diagnosing these patients with retinal disease is typically the examination. In macular disease, typically the near vision is worse than the distant vision proportionally, whereas in cataract it's the other way around. So typically they have more issues with their distance acuity than they do with their near acuity. A history of distortion on an Amsler grid or descriptively is also helpful from a historical standpoint. But again, most of it is your assessment of the difficulty with the view in versus what you're testing on the visual acuity of the patient's symptoms. Now, in cataract surgery, we talk to all of our patients about the various different lens options, and so it seems always kind of silly to sit there and talk to somebody that has a bad epiretinal membrane or geographic scar about implant options such as multifocals, etc. I don't spend a lot of time with it, but I think if they don't hear about the fact that there are these options and you're not a candidate for that, or this does not make sense for you, then what they do is after the cataract surgery, they're talking to their next door neighbor, and their next door neighbor has a special implant that sees perfectly, whereas that patient that had macular degeneration says, well, gosh, if my doctor would have just told me that I could have had this implant, I could have seen perfectly. Again, they don't understand that the reason that they don't see well is their retinal problem. They may not hear that. So the way I handle this group of patients here, they have macular degeneration or had bad PRP and focal laser treatment, or they have only one eye or whatever, is I say there are these implants that have broad range of focus or they correct astigmatism, but for you, because of your epiretinal membrane, because of your macular degeneration, these don't make sense for you. And even with cataract surgery, we're still going to be somewhat limited in your vision because of this other problem that you have. And so that way, they've heard it, they may not remember it, but they've heard it, so you still may have to have them come back in and say, I told you so, which probably, exactly those words are probably not the best way to handle it, but at least you've had that discussion with them and written it down in your chart note, or typed it into your chart note. Astigmatism, most patients have some astigmatism, so again, that's critical to address if they're interested in good uncorrected visual acuity. Let's talk a little bit about epiretinal membrane. If the epiretinal membrane is very mild, and you think it's in the range where, say, a retina specialist normally wouldn't remove that epiretinal membrane, they're 20/20, 20/25, minimal distortion, and they have significant cataract, we'll normally do the cataract surgery first and see how they do. But typically be real careful about maybe a prolonged course of steroids, non-steroidals, monitoring for cystoid macular edema. If you see or suspect epiretinal membrane, it's useful to do a baseline OCT testing before their cataract surgery so that you can then see where they're at a couple, 3 months after the surgery. And so oftentimes do pre and post-op CME or CME screening and testing. If they have significant epiretinal membrane, like in this picture here that you see, with significant distortion, and the cataract is still pretty mild, we'll still typically recommend that they have their epiretinal membrane surgery first, have the vitrectomy, remove the membrane, deal with any of those issues, and then obviously they'll get cataract fairly quickly, so then we'll typically do cataract surgery post-operatively. In some situations, it's probably the minority of situations, then there's very significant epiretinal membrane and also very significant cataract where the retina surgeon cannot operate through that cataract, and so then we'll do combined surgery. A little bit more of a scheduling issue or problem, but is also a possibility. And so depending again on that ratio of epiretinal membrane to cataract, then we'll sometimes do it in any of those three different options. Now, what about macular degeneration? So a lot of the issue, like I mentioned before, is the visual expectations for the patient. And so, again, if they've got 2400 retina and 20/25 cataract, then a lot of times you say, well, gosh, you're not really going to benefit much from this. But if they have 20/30 macular degeneration, 20/50 view in through cataract, then obviously they can get tremendous benefit from cataract surgery. One of the new options that I mentioned is this implantable miniature telescope. And so basically, if the patient's vision in both eyes is outside of where you feel like there's driving capability when they get all done with their cataract surgery, meaning they have severe retinal scarring that's going to limit them to where they're not going to be able to drive, then that's when we would consider a telescopic IOL. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The telescopic IOL is currently approved for patients that have dry macular degeneration that does not require ongoing VEGF treatment. In the typical macular degeneration patient, if they get visually significant cataract and they're having VEGF treatments, they're on an extend or treat and extend type protocol where they're getting injections every 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Once it's dry and they're under a stable protocol, we'll go ahead and remove the cataract and put an implant in. But those patients that are still receiving VEGF treatments will typically not be able to get insurance coverage for the telescopic IOL. If they're in the spot where they're 20/40 for the retinal vision potential, we're not going to do a telescopic IOL. And typically the retina surgeons will give the VEGF drug maybe a week or so before the cataract surgery, and then have the cataract surgery, and then a few weeks later give their next VEGF injection. So they'll just basically time them. And as long as it's not, on the day of the surgery itself, for example, then there's no real restrictions on when they can give those VEGF injections. So let's talk about the implantable miniature telescope. So this is a group of patients that has visually significant cataract, and again, they have macular degeneration in both eyes that has visual potential less than driving vision. And typically you'll be able to tell that based upon their history, and again, that ratio of the view in through their cataract versus the degree of macular atrophy that you see. Now, they should have a refractive error that's fairly neutral. This implant only comes in 1 power of an implant, so they have to have between -6 and +4 refractive error. Their axial length can't be real short, so this is a big implant, and so you can't have a real crowded anterior chamber, so they have to have a fairly deep anterior chamber or kind of a normal anterior chamber. So for example, a +10 patient, typically small eye, not enough room for this implant, as you'll see how big this implant is. They need to have adequate zonular support for the IOL. So the IOL is designed to be placed in the capsular bag, and you should have a healthy endothelium. Again, it's a big implant, so it sits up closer to the endothelium, and so and it's a big incision, and so there's a little bit more potential for damage to the endothelium during the surgical process as well as in the postoperative period. So for example, the patient shouldn't rub their eye, just like we tell our patients not to rub the eye for Sherman's talk earlier, but also for endothelial damage with a big implant or, for example, a phakic IOL. And they need to be able to take topical steroids for an extended period of time. So these patients are on a few months of topical steroids postoperatively because of the large incision and more inflammation around the time of the cataract surgery. Now there is quite a bit of special planning that goes into using the implantable miniature telescope. So obviously these patients are not going to get 20/20 vision and be able to drive again and have kind of normal vision. So we need to help counsel them as to what the true expectations would be with this implantable miniature telescope. And part of that testing involves preoperative experience with an external telescope to see if they'll tolerate it. So it's not really monovision, but it's kind of like monovision, that they're using that telescopic eye for basically their magnified work either at close or in the distance, and then the other eye is sort of their ambulatory eye. So there is a field loss that occurs with the external telescope, and there's a different signal that's going into the brain. And so some patients just don't tolerate that. And so that preoperative testing, this can sometimes be a little bit tricky because they have cataract, they've got, it's external, so internal is probably going to be a little bit better than external, but that experience with that external telescope can help to determine the tolerance. And then it's something, surgery, it doesn't just stop with the surgical procedure itself or with the physical healing of it. There's post-operative visual training, physical therapy, occupational therapy to help them be able to utilize this to its full extent. Now, I mentioned that it's a big implant, and so here's the relative sizes of them. And so you do want to make sure that you've got adequate anterior chamber depth. But it's pretty uncommon to have the anterior chamber depth or the anterior segment size be the limiting factor. Again, most patients have a healthy endothelium unless they've got early Fuchs, etc. So most patients from a physical standpoint could tolerate this implant. So it's really more that do they have the right amount of macular degeneration and can they tolerate this and are the visual expectations normal? And again, we don't put this into patients where you've got 20/30 macular degeneration and we expect them to be able to drive after their cataract surgery. So those patients have traditional cataract surgery, usually with a monofocal IOL. So here's a surgical procedure, and you can see this is a big incision, right? So about the only incisions that we used to make this big were the extra caps. Back when I first started my training, I did about 50% extra cap. And these incisions weren't even that big back in extra cap days. That's before small incision extra cap. So big incision. The phaco is done through just the normal, small portion of that, but the sclera is basically then expanded, or the scleral incision is expanded to where you're going to be able to put the implant in at the very end. A little bit larger capsulorhexis than normal. We use trypan blue to stain so that we can see, make sure the haptics of the implant go in at the end. Again, the typical phacoemulsification. They do have to be phakic already, or phakic still, and so the patients that are already pseudophakic, this implant's currently not approved. The implant itself is extremely expensive, and so if insurance coverage is not available, most of these patients would not have that. And so right now, the insurance companies are very specific about on label before they'll be able to pay for it. So for example, an exchange of a current implant is certainly possible, but it's not insurance covered, so it's really very difficult to get that to be approved. I'll typically use a capsular tension ring. Any of the cases with horizontal support, I think that's helpful, and then discal elastic. So I have cataract out, and basically then enlarge the incision. This is kind of scary to watch, especially when you're used to just watching normal cataract surgery. So like, oh my gosh, there's a huge incision. And lots of suturing that's going to happen, This is not self-sealing, right? So I guess this is the kind of incision they used to have the sandbags and in the hospital and get DVTs and that kind of stuff for. All right, so here's the implant going in. And again, it's a big implant, so you have to be careful not to, scrape it on the back of the endothelium. It's kind of pretty. It's got that little blue skirt to it. And very stiff, rigid haptics. They've got little eyelets on it, so they actually are, in some cases, outside the U.S. or in certain of the trials, they've done sutured them to the sclera, so they have little eyelets for that potentially. And kind of shiny, very reflective. So if the patients are an eye model for a magazine, they probably would like to have that if they're a contact lens model. So then it's implanted into the capsular bag. There's a peripheral iridotomy that's created, and then basically then lots and lots of sutures. So basically it's closed up with incisions, and then we go on to the postoperative course. So I'm going to go ahead. So the postoperative management. So obviously from a 10 to 12 millimeter incision, the cylinder takes probably 6 to 12 months to stabilize. More than typical corneal edema is what you'd expect early from the large incision. Moderate inflammation for a few months. So we take steroids, non-steroidals for an extended period of time. Really, it's pretty rare to need a YAG, partly because this implant pushes so aggressively onto the posterior capsule. So it's pretty unusual to need a YAG, but you could do a YAG capsulotomy. And they obviously need continued retinal monitoring. But you can actually do OCT through this, you can do a fundus exam through this, you can do photos, you can do a fluorescein angiogram, whatever you needed to do through this implant. And again, there's postoperative physical therapy for neuroadaptation. We'll typically cycloplegic for a little while also postoperatively. So in summary, the implantable miniature telescope, we think it's an important new addition to our patients with macular degeneration. Obviously, one of the things that we pride ourselves in at Minnesota Eye Consultants is that even though this may be something that we're not doing 10 of each month, we still think that it's important to offer this to your patients, and so we are offering this for the patients with macular degeneration. Again, one of the biggest screening things is that they need to be stable, dry, without VEGF treatment in the eye that's done. It's done in the better of the visual potential eyes in a patient that both eyes are not capable of driving vision, and lots of patient counseling for this. So thank you. We'll take questions now. Thanks much. So Anna, you're going to, there we go. Okay, so then navigate to polev.com, enter MNI, press join, and then send the questions. And, okay, first, Sherman. All right, so will you do presbyopic IOLs in diabetics with mild non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy? You know, this group of patients, I think, is very difficult. And I'll give you my opinion. So the patients that have significant vascular disease, et cetera, unless they have to have super high motivation to do a presbyopic IOL. So usually that's a group of patients that I'll discourage a presbyopic IOL, see what their response is, and then if I still think they might have good visual potential and they understand it, it's not like I absolutely won't do that in that specific patient, but they're not ones that I'll push much to have a presbyopic IOL. So I prefer not to do that if they have diabetic retinopathy, and that's my typical process. Same thing with even mild 20/20 minus macular degeneration. The presbyopic implants basically reduce the contrast sensitivity, reduce the amount of light going per distance and near, and so my preference is not to do that in that group of patients.
I would say the same thing. I'm pretty conservative with that, though. With the Technics Symphony, which is the extended depth of focus IOL, I'm a little more willing to entertain people with really mild disease, like a couple of diabetic hemorrhages or a few micro aneurysms, where I think that their diabetes would be pretty well controlled, and I'm not real worried about them falling off the cliff, so to speak. I might consider that lens. But the true multifocal IOLs, as David says, are really, really, really picky to any retinal imperfection, any minimal amount of membrane or macular degeneration or retinal edema from diabetes. So I definitely steer away from those for those patients.
You want to take these questions, Sherman?
Yes. Crosslinking cost estimate for self-pay epi-on versus epi-off price. Great question, because we're trying to figure that out ourselves right now. So we're sort of working through that right now, because it's a moving target. It's for the cash pay price, it's around 2,500, 3,000, or somewhere in that range. That's where we've been with our clinical trial. The insurance coverage piece of it, though, actually the price goes sort of way up, and the patient ends up getting credited back for the cost of the drug once the insurance covers it. So for, I guess right now, I kind of think about it as that sort of 2,500 range is still sort of where we're at.
So then the other question is for the IMT, we do a patient that has endothelial dystrophy. Currently, the insurance companies are very specific about being on label, and this is a big implant. So I think in a patient that had cell counts that I consider endothelial dystrophy, like 1,000 or 500, there's no way I would do an implantable miniature telescope in them. There have been some cases where they've had endothelial failure, and they've done DSEC procedures in them in some of the patients. We haven't had any of our patients, specifically because we're very careful about the screening with that. But I think that it's something where I would not recommend that be done in somebody with endothelial dystrophy. Let me go on. I'll take care of the other IMT questions, Sherman, then we can come back out of that one's already been answered. And then the IMT is placed in the better acuity eye. So one of the questions is it placed in the lesser acuity eye? So what they've actually found is the eye that has better potential typically will do better with the IMT. And the IMT actually comes in a couple of different magnifications, but I think it's around 3x magnification that we'll typically do. And most of these patients will be able to see letters in the 2080 to 2100 range, even though they have a 2400 potential retina. And that's with the appropriate spectacles outside that we typically will fit at about 3 to 4 months once their cylinder is done. And we've done 5 of the telescopes at this point, have a couple of them scheduled coming up. And we watch the pressure very carefully, and these patients, most of these patients already have fairly significant macular degeneration. So one of the questions asked about if the vision worsens, can you go to a stronger implant? We put the maximum power implant in to start out with, and so typically with that they do fine. All right, good, thanks all.
make your way to the front. There's lots of seats up here, so we want to make sure you're comfortable and have a spot to better enjoy the presentations. Next.